World's first Tax Thursday, barely a week after launch of voluntary assets and income declaration scheme.
Acting President condoles with people of Kano, describes late Metama Sule as a great orator and bridge builder.
These guidelines under review are derived from the existing EIA Act that hitherto did not adequately address the global emerging environmental issues.
Nigeria reviews 15 guidelines on environmental impact assessment to fit into technological advancements.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we are focusing on nudity in the creative industry.
Now, Nigeria and African societies indeed were built on dignity, fostered by decency and moral values. And punishments such as ostracism, refusal to marry from or to be married into, and many other measures were often taken sometimes against indecent and moral behaviors. And
yes, Kingsley, in fact, some communities even banish families and individuals that were found to have committed indecent or immoral behaviors. The interpretations of what is moral or indecent, however, varies from place to place.
Now, that's right, Kirian. What is considered immoral or indecent in one community or society may be seen as the right way to behave in others. But regardless of the situation, morality and decency are core attributes of virtues that were cherished in our society.
And indeed, over time, these values have been decimated with nudity and obscenity taking over the societal space, which explains the concerns being expressed in many quarters about the high level of nudity, especially in the creative industry, where musicians, actors, and actresses dress and act in manners that are contrary to the established norms of decency and morality in the Nigerian society.
And indeed, as we know, the situation doesn't just stop in the creative industry, Kirian. Now, it became so rampant in institutions of higher learning, so much so that dress codes had to be introduced in almost all the schools in order to check the trend of exposure, excessive exposure of flesh.
Of course, it's become a commonplace that advertisers are also accused of promoting nudity as they use half-clad or nude women for advertisement of products, some of which portray women as sex objects, even on products that have little or nothing to do with women.
In fact, movies from music, advertisements, as you just indicated, beauty contests, reality shows, and so on and so forth. The competition oftentimes is about who bears it the most. And even the streets and places of worship are not spared from this scourge of nudity.
Of course, yes. And while the regulatory agencies such as the Film Censorship Board and the National Broadcasting Commission have been doing a lot to reduce such contents, in the case of NBC declaring such materials as not fit to be broadcast, the availability of such contents on international channels, accessible also on paid TV, online and on the streets, makes such efforts too little to have any impact.
Now, from the clergy to parents, and the voices crying against nudity in the Nigerian creative industry are increasing and indeed getting louder. Now, what is responsible for the high level of nudity in our creative industry? Will musical videos and films not sell without nudity? And what is it that distinguishes creativity from, as some persons would say, just mere craziness? And what should regulatory agencies equally do to rein in nudity in the creative industry in Nigeria? And what is the role of parents in controlling what their children and wards watch? These questions and more we shall seek answers to from our guests in the course of the program as we discuss nudity in the creative industry. Today on Good Morning Nigeria, my name is Kingsley Osadolo and I welcome you to the program, reaching you as always live and the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority.
And I'm Kieran Umaya, well, with Kinsley, welcoming you to the program. And in the course of today's edition of the package, we shall bring to you our companion segment, which will include newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment news. It's now time for the morning news with Tessie. Hello, Tessie. What's on the news this morning?
Good morning, Kieran and Kinsley. It's good to see you. Good morning, Nigeria. Here's the news. The federal government has commenced the weekly Thursday tax awareness campaign Tax Thursday, adopted to enlighten Nigerians on the necessity of paying tax regularly. Joy Uzo, who covered the maiden edition, reports that it is part of efforts to actualize compliance for the voluntary assets and income declaration scheme, recently launched by the acting president, Professor Yemi Oshimajo, in Abuja.
We sincerely believe that if Nigerians do what is expected in the area of payment of tax, the government will have enough funds to carry out its own responsibilities. And this new scheme basically says that if you declare your income, pay your taxes, you not pay interest, you not pay penalty, but with its first step to ensure that Nigeria becomes greater. After 31st of March, and you don't declare your income, you don't pay your taxes, then we'll prosecute you. You can lose your assets that you do not declare or pay interest or pay tax on. You can also be sent to jail.
And a quick look at legislative matters. The Senate has adopted the report of the Committee of Tertiary Education and TED Fund on the National Open University of Nigeria Act Amendment Bill 2017. The bill seeks to amend the existing legislation with a view to removing perception of the public about the university, as explained by Senator Barau Jibrin.
To include ICT as another means of providing tuition towards the advancement of learning throughout Nigeria. The National Open University, as currently run, depends critically on virtual learning and students' individual research. Hence, the need for improvement and introduction of helpful learning tools as presented by ICT.
Some senators describe the amendment as timely and in tune with the global best practice.
Inclusion of ICT towards improving teaching for our students, and we hope that this will go a long way in further deepening the learning that our students have in the Open University mechanism.
The House of Representatives is considering a bill for an act to establish a regulatory framework for water resources in Abuja, in Nigeria. The 14th section bill emanated from the executive and has been passed for second reading. It is believed that when passed, the bill will enhance availability of potable water supply in Nigeria.
Fundamental change, and we'll see that water resources of this country is unbundled to encourage the public-private participation that will connect and build a strong nexus between the national water resources and the value chain in the environment, agriculture, health, inland waterways, solid minerals, forestry, electricity generation, emergency management, meteorological and hydrological sectors.
The bill intends to establish a regulatory framework for the allocation and use of water resources to ensure the proper prioritization of water use, the management of water basin level, the creation of an enabling environment for investment by creating a clear regulatory framework.
And away from the legislature, INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu Thursday received members of the steering committee of ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commission, ECONEC. The body was established in Conakry, Guinea in 2008 as a regional platform for promotion of credible election. The ECONEC steering committee meeting holding in Abuja, Nigeria, is targeted at reviewing the 2017-2018 work plan and statutes of network, especially towards support of peaceful and credible presidential elections in Nigeria in October 2017, and to determine support and needs assessment for that of Sierra Leone, scheduled for March 2018.
The network by making it effective and efficient in ensuring the sustainability of its goals. To this end, the last General Assembly in Cotonou also agreed to establish a permanent secretariat here in Abuja.
The INEC chairman, who is also the president of ECONEC, led members of the steering committee for the commissioning of ECONEC secretariats in Abuja. To address contemporary environmental challenges occasioned by emerging advances in technology, the federal government has commenced the process of reviewing new guidelines on environmental impact assessment. Mayor Ogidi reports that 15 sectors are affected, including health and electronic waste, urban development, oil and gas, and that of sector regulators, are to review and identify benefits inherent therein.
The existing EIA Act that hitherto did not adequately address the global emerging environmental issues, such as strategic environmental assessment and incorporate climate-smart decisions. Therefore, the need to renew the guidelines and even develop new ones cannot be overemphasized, especially considering the dynamic nature of our environment.
Acting President Yemi Osinbajo says Africa has lost a great leader and a rare gem, Dan Masani Kanu, Alhaji Yusuf Maitama Sule. This was during a condolence visit to the Emir of Kanu, Muhammadu Sanusi II, in his palace. Acting President Yemi Osinbajo described the late Dan Masani not only as a great orator, but a bridge builder.
Dan Masani, when I was 15 years old, on my first interaction with him, and he was then the minister, and he came to give a lecture at the John F. Kennedy essay competition. He gave the keynote address. The title of the keynote address was "Africa Has Arrived."
The federal government approved airlines for the 2017 Hajj exercise have assured Nigerians of prompt airlift to and from Saudi Arabia without compromising safety and comfort of the pilgrims. This was at a signing ceremony of airlift agreement between the National Hajj Commission of Nigeria and the various airlines representatives. Chairman National Hajj Commission Abdullahi Mukhtar Muhammad commended the airlines for accepting to partake in the exercise in spite of the recession.
It's very critical. It's coming at the time that our country is facing a lot of economic challenges.
We pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be of guidance, to make it more successful than the previous year.
The Hajj fair for this year's Hajj 2017 has been slashed a little, but this is a clarion call to all Nigerians to see how they are going to help their citizens.
Meanwhile, State Pilgrims Board agencies and commissions have been asked to extend collection of Hajj fares by 1 week. And that's the news for now. Kingsley and Kieran will be back right after this break. Good morning.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Here's your order.
I think this is not exactly what we ordered. I ordered a Coca-Cola Zero.
No problem. I can give you 0 calories, 0 sugar, and a great Coca-Cola taste. Here's the Coca-Cola Zero you ordered.
Do it again.
You still look like you need a Coca-Cola. Just look inside your bag.
Wherever you feel, together be real, together
Enjoy.
Central Bank of Nigeria to unveil watch list as it goes tough on the e-fraudsters and negative trends that characterize Nigerian stock exchange reverses. Details of these and more on Business News with Amina Nujaim.
Good morning and welcome. On Business News today, the Debt Management Office recently made known the federal government's debt profile, which stands at 16.2 trillion naira from 10.9 trillion naira at the end of 2015. The 2017 budget alone is projecting a fiscal deficit estimated at 2.4 trillion naira, with domestic borrowing accounting for 53%, about 1.3 trillion naira. The rising debt profile is not surprising given the widening budget deficit and depreciation of the naira.
To fund key elements of the budget, especially those drivers of the economy in terms of infrastructure, it will be necessary to borrow, especially the economic fundamentals of the country can support borrowing at this stage. The only caution that we need to put in place is to monitor what the states are doing in this direction. The state should not just borrow for borrowing's sake. There must be a mechanism for ensuring that the funds are deployed in those areas that drive the economy.
What we are doing currently, if not carefully watched, is mortgaging the future of our children and our great-grandchildren. The budget as it is, through tending towards borrowing, is actually very risky.
And as part of efforts towards ensuring financial stability, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, in collaboration with the Bankers Committee, has put in place a framework on a watch list for Nigerian financial system. The move is to address the increasing incidences of fraud and other unethical practices with a view to engendering public confidence in the financial system. The central bank stated this in its exposure draft regulatory framework for BVN operations and watch list for Nigerian financial system, posted on its website. It explained that the 16-page framework, without prejudice to existing laws, would be to guide the operations of a watch list in the financial system. The watch list is a database of bank customers identified by their bank verification numbers who have been involved in confirmed fraudulent activities. The Africa Development Bank, AFDB, says that financial markets in Africa need to increase their lending to micro, small and medium-sized enterprises in the continent by at least $135 billion in order to meet their demand. In a statement, AFD noted that MSMEs in Africa needed increased affordable loans and more diverse and innovative financing instruments to enable them grow. According to the UN, MSMEs represent around 90% of global economic activity and are on the front line of embracing transformative technologies and new business models. AFDB noted that firms with fewer than 20 employees and less than 5 years experience provide most jobs in Africa's formal sector. The bank said it supported 156,000 owners and operators of MSMEs in Africa in 2016 by providing them with financial services to start and grow their businesses. The market extended its 3-day losing streak as the NSE ASI continued to dip further on Wednesday. Let's now take a graphic summary of closing figures of Thursday. That is it on the Business News segment. I am Amina Nujaim.
Thank you very much, Amina Nujaim, for the business package. Next for us, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
And we thank you for staying with us on the program. And here we have our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Altoyabe, in the studio. Bayo, good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome
Nigeria.
as always.
Thank you. Good morning, Kinsley.
Delighted to have you.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Yeah, Kinsley.
All right, yeah, the front pages, of course, are fairly busy this morning, and a story that is common to the front pages that we have, cast in one way or the other, has to do with that of the position of the acting chair of the EFCC. Now, let's begin with the Daily Trust. Daily Trust has it as its lead story with a kicker, R5. Oshibajo told me Mago won't be removed. That's the headline for that as cast by Daily Trust. And then you also have that story as the lead for the Authority newspaper. The Authority newspaper, that's his lead story. It says, nobody can remove Mago. And it's attributed to Oshibajo. But of course, there are other headlines on the front pages of the papers. I return again to Daily Trust, and I'm sure Kirian, my colleague, will also read similar headlines with regard to the position of the acting chairman of the EFCC. Below the nameplate of Daily Trust newspaper, Etisalat debt. Reps want telcos accounts audited. Reps want telcos accounts audited. Details of the story can be found on page 13. And then Kano names varsity after Maitama Sule. That story we took earlier at page 12. And then also there on the front page, Senate approves NYSC and law school for non-graduates. Senate approves NYSC and law school for non-graduates. NOUN stands for the National Open University of Nigeria. Details of that story can be found on page 8. And banks lost 2.2 billion naira to electronic fraud in 2016. That's according to the CBN.
All right, thank you. And we have here Daily Independent, and I want to begin really on a sad note. The news that came to Nigerians yesterday as a shock, and that's just above the nameplate. Super Eagles goalkeeper Ikeme diagnosed with leukemia. Some say acute leukemia. And with the rider NFF Odebami Onibinde Nwosu, others expressed shock and sadness. That's indeed a bad story there for Nigeria. Now, below the nameplate, we have KMO. 29 others receive SAN Award. The story is on page 7 of the Daily Independent. And Oshibajo to Senate, of course, as Kinsley has read in some other headlines, nobody can remove Magu. Of course, Sage, also with the writer, Sage says, Kaku back acting president, perhaps on that issue. We will address clamor for restructuring soon, says acting president Oshibajo. Story is on page 4. Now below that, we have knife helicopter crashes in Borno. That was yesterday, and it was all over the place yesterday. It's on page 7 of a Daily Independent. And on the left side, we have Senate, OK's NYSC Law School for Open University, as read also by Kinsley in the other headline. And below the photograph, the Daily Independent, governors challenge EFCC claims over Paris Club refund. Yeah, and also below the photograph have South reps threaten showdown over summon of Jonathan, that's the ex-president. And with the rider, Patience Jonathan alleges harassment, calls for intervention. All of that on Daily Independent. You can get that story on page 4 of the Daily Independent. Bayo.
Yes. Let's start on the human interest story. Carl Ikeme, you remember him? That tall goalkeeper who stands for the Super Eagles, and when he fills the goalpost, you seem to have the impression that there's no way for the ball to pass behind him. He had been suffering injury, and he just returned to playing time only last week when Nigerians were very happy that we now have a goalkeeper, particularly that we're lamenting after the loss to South Africa recently. Unfortunately, just as he was going for a test for pre-season, he was found to have tested to acute leukemia. Leukemia is a progressive disease of the blood, and sometimes it can be fatal in instances described as cancer of the blood. However, cancer, when detected early, can be managed effectively and sometimes contained. Carl Ikeme is to begin chemotherapy immediately. The Nigerian Football Federation and the football fraternity have all expressed shock. But knowledge, but all his colleagues say that they know Carl Ikeme to be a strong and determined person, and they believe that this attribute of his will stand him in very good stead in fighting back at the disease. Carl Ikeme became the Super Eagles choice goalkeeper in October 2015, and he was standing in the post strongly and supporting Nigeria when Nigeria played against Tanzania as well as Swaziland, and also some qualifying matches of the AFCON. We wish him quick recovery from the chemotherapy. Now the story that has dominated all the headlines. It was at the ceremony, commissioning ceremony of the zonal office of the EFCC in Kaduna, where the acting president, represented by the governor of Kaduna State, Governor Nasir El-Rufai, and he said, the acting president says he has spoken up to President Muhammadu Buhari on Mr. Magu, and the president has assured that as long as he, Buhari, remain president, Magu will not vacate the anti-corruption seat. So it will be recalled that twice he was scheduled to be confirmed. The first time he was turned down, and the second time he was screened at plenary and rejected. It may also be recalled that there are at least over a dozen members of the Senate who are said to have cases with the Economic and Financial Crime Tribunal. There are contentions that the prerogative of the president to appoint officer to a position in the Constitution override the provision in the EFCC Act that subjects that to Senate confirmation. The acting president is reported to have said, as long as I remain the acting president, as well as Muhammadu Buhari remain the president, Mr. Ibrahim Magu will remain the EFCC chairman. The Senate has called for the rejection of Mr. Magu as it is recommended in his confirmation screening test, as well as the other of the four conditions which they stressed was that it will henceforth not accept to confirm any other nominee of the executive. So,
is there any constitutional issue here? Is it why the dragging? Why is it drag?
There is a position here. The Senate is asserting its right by the EFCC Act, which takes its root from the Constitution, to confirm certain categories of nominees. And the arguments on the other side is that, yes, that is the prerogative of the Senate, but the prerogative of the executive and the president to appoint, particularly in a section of the Constitution, overrides what has been provided for in the EFCC Act. And it's known when a law is in conflict with the Constitution prevails. But these are arguments here and there. And for every issue, there are always two sides to the coin. And when it arises like this, the best way to go about it, go to the Constitutional Court and have a pronouncement.
Yeah,
because this is a constitutional issue.
We don't have a constitutional court, by the way, because the hierarchy of superior courts we have in the country, the apex is the Supreme Court. Yeah, but also I just wanted to, Kirian and Bayo, just to indicate, when it is said, with the headlines that we have read, Magu remains the EFCC boss, nobody can remove him as chairman. I think the proper inflection should be that he remains as acting chairman of the EFCC. He has not transmuted from being an acting chairman to becoming a chairman. And the EFCC Act does not provide for any delimitation of the tenure of an acting chair. So within that, of course, the acting president is well within the law.
That is the argument of one of the silk in Nigeria, Femi Falana, that there is no law that says the Senate has to confirm for an acting chairman for him to function.
That's right. That's the point. But the other argument you just raised, I mean, this, so that we don't drag it for too long a time, that said there are provisions in the Constitution that said the president has powers to appoint certain kinds of persons, and then particularly for extra ministerial departments. But those extra ministerial departments are creations of law.
Yes, in
and,
the Constitution.
And if the law therefore provides for the proper mechanism, then you have to respect the letter of the law. But respecting the letter of the law also means taking cognizance of the fact that there is no delimitation on the tenure of an acting chair for the EFCC, nor is there any provision anywhere that indicates that you cannot represent a nominee for X number of times for confirmation, notwithstanding the number of times such a person is rejected for confirmation.
The reasons for all of this is because, as we presented there about 3 or 4 days ago, on this program about lacuna in our constitution and other laws that have been made in the process. So it's just that. So
you cannot possibly have every situation provided for either in the law or in the Constitution. And that's why we have Section 6 for the judiciary.
And all of that.
All right, the other story I'd like to draw attention is that the acting president has visited Kano to condole the governor of Kano State, the emir of Kano, and the citizens of Kano. And he described Dr. Maitama Yusuf as an elder statesman that is a symbol of national unity. And he was, as he put it, my father. He visited the home of Dr. Yusuf Maitama Sule, and he said he first met him in the United States when he, Yomi Oshibajo, was 15 years old. It was at the ceremony when he was to deliver a lecture on the Africa Has Arrived, the Cultural Reawakening. He said he several times, 5 years later, he met him, and he also met him while he was a lecturer and also a counselor and was going to the court to file cases. He says a few days before he traveled to Egypt, he was with him. And that is why he has come to the home, not as acting president, but as a son visiting and to condole the death of a departing father. Right. He described him as an embodiment of humility to everyone, big or small, despite the prominent position he has occupied in life.
All right, Bayo, thanks a lot. Let's go to this newspaper very quickly from the top of this newspaper, that's top of the front page. Telcos must meet financial integrity standards, says NCC board. Telcos must meet financial integrity standards, says NCC board. And I need a better budget to work, Fashola tells Senate. Details of the story can be found on page 10. Now, the lead story for this day comes with a kicker. Oshibajo, federal government will address clamor for restructuring soon. Now, the rider, of course, two riders there have to do with the EFCC matter, which we just discussed. Says no one can remove Mago and U.S. transparency bill to expose illicit funds from Nigeria and others. And also there on the front page, cement price to fall soon as costs of production drops. Now, there's a story that I would like us to just see very quickly, Kriya, before you come in. It's on page 12 of this day newspaper. Page 12 of this day newspaper, if we can focus on that, the headline is France to end sales of petrol and diesel vehicles by 2040. That's on page 12 of this day. So this is the year 2017. So in another 23 years, they'll stop the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles. That's a Renault car that is there, by the way. And then that's some further doom for the oil industry.
All right, now let's go to the Pilot newspaper quickly now. Below the nameplate, we have a federal government to commence restructuring soon, the presidency on page 2 of Nigerian Pilot. And besides that, we have nominees rejection. Don't ground governance. TUC tells the Senate is on page 5. And the main headline, well, we've read it in other newspapers. Magu remains EFCC boss or Shebajo on page 5 of Pilot. With two riders here, says Buhari supports him, so do I. And again, they want to cripple the commission, says Magu himself, the man at the center stage. Now, Senate OK's NYSC Law School for now graduates, we have that in other newspapers. And below the photograph here, we have some headlines. Below the photograph, Group hails judiciary on undue birth certificate saga on page 6. And also on page 5 is environment stakeholders review EIA guidelines. And close to that is we must redirect economy through technology, says the Minister of Science and Technology, Dr. Bonoya Ono. And at the extreme, Senate to reshuffle committees. And that's all about it on the new Nigerian Pilot. Bayo, you may like to come in on one or two.
Yes, quickly, I just wanted to draw attention to what the Director General of Bureau for Public Service Reform, Dr. Joe Abba, has drawn attention of Nigeria that the plight we are going through with power is something we have to put up with for a while. He was speaking at a reform lecture and he said, you cannot just go switch on light and have light. He said infrastructure needed for the light will have to be put in place. He said, yes, for years there have been, unless for years there is consistent and deliberate attempt to put in place the infrastructure that will, in the long run, ensure that power supply is steady. He said the reforms that were carried out is slow, but it will take a gradual process, and the infrastructure that is being put in place will ensure that when power is fully ready and available, it will be steady and dependable.
All right, Baya Toby, thank you for being with us today. And indeed, since Monday, I'm sure you're looking forward to a quiet and restful weekend. Thank you. All right.
Eagerly.
Okay,
Thank
so
you
Baya
very
Toby there, Hadisupa Revere. It's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the NTA. We take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with a subject matter that we all see from time to time, and just wondering precisely what's going on. It's nudity now the in thing.
The Future Assured project of the wife of the president, Aisha Muhammad Buhari, is carrying out free medical screening and distribution of food items at various IDP camps while ensuring the economic empowerment of women through training and skill acquisition. In recognition of her efforts, wives of governors have lent their voices and support.
In Kogi State, we feel the impact of Future Assured, especially in women and children.
The Future Assured program of Mrs. Aisha Muhammad Buhari, the wife of the president, has been very assuring and still reassuring in Sokoto State. It has impacted positively in the areas of humanity, especially women and children.
Supports the Future Assured initiative. Email programs@futureassured.org.ng. Future Assured, promoting and protecting the lives of Nigerian women and children.
Cadbury Bournvita now comes in an attractive new 500-gram refill pack. Simply open and reseal after use to retain the chocolatey and creamy taste. Cadbury Bournvita, prepare to win.
If you are just joining us, you are watching Good Morning Nigeria, and our focus today is on nudity in creative industry. But before you meet our guests, here is the background report by Ahmad Ambali to set the stage for the conversation.
Picture from a nightclub in Nigeria in the 60s personifies the allure and beauty of the African spirit. Modest and dignifying, images like this during the epoch represents the morals and values that made Nigerians who they are. Over time, however, that image has been decimated, with nudity and obscenity taking over the societal space. And nowhere is this better reflected than in the creative industry. From movies to music videos, advertisements, beauty contests to reality shows, the competition is about who bears it the most. What has been left of caution has been thrown to the winds, and today it's hard to distinguish between creativity and craziness. The culture of nudity and obscenity, which used to be spoken of in harsh tones, are now being blared loudly in explicit songs and racy videos. Nudity and sex-proud occupants of the bedroom now shamelessly mount the public stages. Industry watchers attribute this to a number of factors. The craze for fame might not be far from the least, but the relaxation of regulations over what is put out for consumption also shares blame in this decadence. Tackling this unwholesome trend requires a collective effort. Industry watchers say what they produce is only but a reflection of the society they dwell in. To reconstruct the image that exudes from the screens and the lyrics that seep out from songs will mean a deconstruction of society itself. From the homes to the pulpit, the message must resonate, just as it is important to place less emphasis on glamour and uplift values and ethics that make us Nigerians. Guests on NTA Good Morning Nigeria will also be having a say in the matter as the issue of nudity in the creative industry takes center stage.
Ahmad Ambali, thank you very much there for that background report. Now we have a guest with us here in the studios as well as from remote locations. So join us in discussing this subject matter. First, at this time, we'd like to welcome to our studios a director who is in the office of the Director General of the National Broadcasting Commission. Is Dr. Armstrong Idachaba. I also wanted to say Dr. Louis Armstrong Idachaba. Dr. Idachaba, a pleasure to have you join us.
This is Dr. Aduku Armstrong Idachaba. Thank you.
Right. Okay.
Good to be here.
All right. And then we also have joining us from our Lagos network studios at this time, of course, a very well-known face, is an actor, also a movie director, Mr. Fred Amata. Mr. Fred Amata, a pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria from our Lagos studios.
Pleasure to be here and to see my good friend of many years, Armstrong Idachaba. Hello. Good morning.
All right, you're welcome indeed. And it is my pleasure to welcome Alhaji Abdullahi Meikano Usman. Meikano Usman is actually the President, Motion Picture Practitioners Association of Nigeria, MOPAN, an umbrella body of all film practitioners in the northern part of the country. He's also a script writer, movie producer. Alhaji Meikano, joining us from our Kaduna Network Center, is good morning to you.
Good morning, sir, and thank you for having me in the studio. Fred, how is Lagos? You seem to be in a very, very good mood. And the issue we're going to discuss is very important. It's something that affects virtually everybody in this country. So it's good to have me in the studio and the other guests in the studio. Thank you for having me, sir. Yes.
All right, that's great. You are all welcome, gentlemen. We'll be joined also by other guests in the course of this program. But now let's begin with the NBC. We want to ask you, Dr. Idachaba, have you actually noticed that...
I was just wondering, Kyrian, you said we're going to be joined by another guest.
Yes.
Let's probably just introduce that guest now before we begin the conversation.
Okay,
yes.
Okay. The guest is set. Okay, our guest is actually set in Port Harcourt, and it's very exciting that we're going to have a female guest on this program this morning, because our topic actually has a lot to do with women. Hilda Dokubo is an actress and producer of Nollywood. She is in our Port Harcourt studio. Hilda, it's good morning to you and welcome to our program. Well, we seem to be having a audio difficulty there, but I hope it will be rectified as we move on. For now, Dr. Armstrong, you're the director in the Director General's office of the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission. Has it in any way occurred to your establishment that there's a lot of nudity in the creative industry?
Thank you, Kingsley. Thank you, Kyrian. Someone said at the beginning of this program that I think it's Meikano, that nudity is a trend that is not only topical, but is also disturbing for very many obvious reasons. When I got the invitation to appear on this program, and I saw that you scheduled the program to begin at 7:30 a.m., I asked myself as a regulator if we were not indirectly adding to the issue. 7:30 a.m., Nigerians are going to discuss nudity. I hope that along the line, somebody is not going to go graphic and begin to negatively stimulate the consciousness of people.
As you could see, let me just interject here, Dr. Idachaba. In our background report by Ahmad Ambali, you could see some of those scenes that were either somewhat explicit or otherwise suggestive. We had them in the fuzzy videos. That's right.
Fantastic. That is just making a teaser. I know we'll be responsible enough to create the discussion within the bounds of ethics. But basically, yes, nudity is an issue that has become very worrisome. And not only in Nigeria, globally, all societies have had to deal with the challenge of nudity. All over the world, there are people who assume that, like the right of expression, that they also have the right to express themselves their own natural way. You may have heard about nudists. You may have heard about people who talk about naturalism. There are people, in spite of your best efforts, that think that they have the right to appear just how they wish to appear. Strangely, you find out that on the social media, people post pictures that are very, to say, very indecent. And it's something that people have to bother about, especially when it is broadcast. I mean, you can enjoy your nudity in your privacy, but when you go to the extent of transmitting and exposing your nudity in the most offensive manner to other viewers, then it becomes a matter of concern. But like I said, it's a trend that is very worrisome. Recently, we saw, is it Serena Williams, you know, in her pregnancy, also posing nude and posting on the cover of a magazine. So women especially, and I'm sorry to say that, are increasingly degrading and denigrating womanhood by the extent to which they express themselves within the nude phenomenon, and I don't think it's proper. So that is why countries, including we in Nigeria as regulators, have regulations in place to ensure that at least there's a modicum of decency with regards to what can be carried in broadcast.
All right, Dr. Dachaba, thank you very much. We'll come back to you later in the course of the conversation. Let's go over now to Fred Amata in our Lagos Network studios. We introduced him earlier. Mr. Amata, you listened to Dr. Dachaba. What's your reaction to comments, frequent comments these days made by critics who say that nudity has become rather a permanent feature of the Nigerian creative industry, and that without it, you know, there appears to be nothing on sale?
Well, first of all, I would like to go back a little and look at what nudity is in the arts. What is the place of nudity in the arts? Should there be such flagrant exposition, flagrant expressions of our bodies? The thing to talk about in this area is scholars have argued, is what is the intent of the artist who is portraying this, doing this kind of nudist and expressing nudity in our works, especially like Dr. Dachaba has said, when it is for broadcast. We know that nudity in itself can be art, depending on the intent. But the intent as to when nudity becomes pornography is where the greatest worries lie. And for me, over the years, you come to see that it is becoming more and more a challenge to society, the way nudity is portrayed in our art. We know, if we go back to some great artists like Michelangelo, who once said that where is the spirit? How empty is the spirit? How blind is the spirit that cannot see the fact that the shoe, that the foot is more noble than the shoe, or that the skin is more dignified than the clothing with which it is covered. Now, this gives you the challenges that in art or in art we have to face. While in one instance, nudity in itself can be art, used properly, like Michelangelo's art. The danger is in the expression. And we have seen a lot that we have tended more to the pornographic expressions of nudity than to the creative or artistic. And this is a trend that I agree with Idachaba, should not be encouraged.
All right, thank you, Amata. Thank you, Fred. We will return to you. But now we'd like to hear from Alhaji Usman Mekano. I think he's been itching to say something this morning. Alhaji Usman, Amata says nudity harms the creative industry. He also said that nudity can be used creatively. Now, having said all that, it does seem that artists, especially the on-stage performers, believe that nudity has a way of captivating their audience. What would you say about this?
One thing that I want to make absolutely clear here is that, first of all, we are a people. We have our culture. We have our beliefs, we have our religions, and we are from different homes. If you look at an African and a Nigerian, to be precise in this matter, I want to believe that we are from various backgrounds that abhor or discourage the exposition of the body to, especially to the public. So for me, nudity really has no place when it comes to issues regarding cinema, regarding the music videos that we're having. And to answer your question, quite okay, I agree that some of the producers, some of the actors, some of the artists, and those of us in the creative industry, some of us feel, and in fact to an extent believe, that exposing oneself, will bring about fame, will bring about money, that okay, I'm going to sell my videos, I'm going to sell my music. So some of us think that if they go that way, the chances are that they're going to make more money than if they go, the normal way. But the fact remains that what I want us in the industry to understand is that we're not just our normal selves. We are public faces. We are ambassadors. People look upon us for guidance. People look upon us for examples. People emulate us. Young people emulate actors and musicians. So what are you selling to the future generation? I think that's one thing that we need to think about. We need to ask ourselves, so what are we leaving behind? If at the end of my life as a musician or as an actor or as whatever, so what am I leaving behind? What do I want to be remembered for? That is one thing that I want us to really think about. It's very, very pertinent. Karian, I want us to be very, very careful about this. It's not just about making money. It's not just about selling our movies or our music. It's about what are we doing to our culture. We have a culture. After my election, I visited Lex Emerson in Kano. When I was in his house and with my ESCO members, he talked about culture. Karian, the late Emerson in Kano kept mentioning culture. Let's portray our culture. Let's be who we are until that man shed tears. That sends message to all of us in the industry. So we need to be up and doing.
All right, Alhaji Abdullahi Mekano Usman, thank you very much. Again, we'll come back to you later on in the course of this conversation. Let's go back again to Port Harcourt, where we earlier introduced Ms. Hilda Dokubo, of course, a very well-known Nollywood actress and producer. If you can see her there on the right side of the split screen. Let's get your take on this. I mean, some persons argue that what we are seeing in terms of nudity in the creative industry amounts to nothing more than objectification of women, and therefore, further eroding whatever values that we have. What's your reaction?
Good morning. Objectification of women. That's a new one, and I kind of like it because, yes, we have learned to objectify women. They have become our objects for entertainment. But, well, be that as it may, as it concerns the art, I'd like for us to ask ourselves very simple questions. What sells? Because it is show and business. And as a business person, you want to make some profit. So I want to think this morning like a business person. What sells to your audience? What appeals to your audience? And then I'd like to also look at it as an artist myself and as a woman. And then as to what we call culture. As an artist, the cultural clothes for women where I come from is very short wrapper that is tied all the way up, and that length, and then a top that covers just the bust line. And that costume runs across nearly every community around where I come from, all the way to the east and some part of the west as well. Up north, what I met first as the costume for a woman is a half top that stops right under the bust. The whole belly line is open and exposed. In a way, if you ask me, that too is some kind of nudity. So as Fred said, is the intent. What is the intention for what you do? What is the intention? The reason that I think that a lot of artists today, producers, directors, and investors inject in scenes with that obscenity or nudity, as you would like to call it, is because it sells. It appeals to the world. Every small promo that you see, there has to be a naked woman somewhere because that's what appeals to them. But that it appeals to them, does that appeal to the one that is doing it? Does it appeal to the public? To the buyers, yes. And because people want to make more money, they're letting go of certain things. People don't listen to you. When you write, open the gossip magazines. When you write decent stories about people, they don't sell. Nobody wants to read a caption that says something nice about anybody, but everybody wants to know who is sleeping with who slept last with who. So if the whole idea, it's society that needs to first react to this before the creative mind, because what the creative artist is doing is selling back the society to the society. Not necessarily, we're simply mirrors. That's what we're doing. We're mirroring the society and sending it back to the society so the society can look at what they're doing to themselves. When the buyer stops buying nudity, the performer will stop performing scenes with nudity.
Sorry, in fact, you have opened up a very interesting angle to this conversation. And that takes me back to what Fred Amata said, because you are in the same industry. He talked about creative use of nudity. I would like you to come in here, Hilda. Is there any way nudity application in drama or in music or in even normal acting, especially on-stage performance, can you ever be creative? And why I'm asking this question is because of the fact that you said you are giving back to society or to go from society. Now, in this connection, are we also thinking of the younger generation of the viewers?
I'm thinking greatly of the younger Nigerian, the child unborn ones. I'm thinking greatly about them, and my heart loves them, even without knowing all of them. Can we use nudity creatively? Yes. We can suggest a lot of those things that we do. We can suggest a love scene. We can suggest a sex scene. We can suggest a rape scene. We can use... if you are doing this on stage, you can use movements to suggest what's going on. You can use lines, you can use songs and all of that. But the truth is, the Nigerian society where we have found ourselves, people are getting too expressive. People, when you hold the person's face, you just hear people shout, kiss now, kiss now, kiss now. So you're when we started acting, first we used to mime kisses. We used to mime sex scenes. All you had to see was a bra fall off, an underwear fall off, and then the next thing it's a black, and people can say, okay, sex happened here. But right now, people are online all the time. The Western culture is influencing our own culture, and people are getting whiter than milk already, even as dark as we are as Africans. People want to be whiter than, and you know, I keep saying to people, this importation of culture is what is affecting us. So as Mirror, you had to actually show that. But can we tone down a bit of it and be more creative and artistic? Yes, we can.
Dokubo, well, of course, you can see your one of your colleagues there. That's Elijah Usman. You know, apparently in disagreement with the point you just made. But we'll come back to you later on in the course of the conversation. Let's come back to Dr. Armstrong Databa here in our studios. Hilda Dokubo raised a number of points. As to, you know, the dress culture, for instance, you find in virtually almost every part of the country, which takes me to the point that you find with regard to what we also have in parts of our culture, at least in the past, if not in some locations, namely the maiden dances. In most cases, they are often bare-breasted, yeah. You know, bare-breasted, but it wasn't vulgar. Mm-hmm. So what was the creative use to which such things were put? Now, here we are. What is the major challenge that we face? Hilda argues that, oh, well, the creative industry is reflecting back to society, what society is putting forward to the creative industry. But what is the dynamic in terms of the power of the creative industry to also alter societal mores and values?
Thank you, Kingsley. I think that this discussion is getting interesting. I am also expectedly energized by the fact that both Hilda and Fred, as artists and performers, seem to be making a case for the commodification of the creative industry, irrespective of what the object is. And in this case, the argument happens to be that indecency or nudity sells. And that is the common assumption in popular culture. It is profit motivated to the extent that it doesn't matter whatever you sell, so long as there are people that can buy it. But that argument is defeatist to the extent that it can hurt society. I was impressed that Hilda said she loved children from the depth of her heart. We would expect that emotive feeling is further upgraded in terms of the implementation of your also artistic endowment or creative impulses. There is a limit to profit maximization. And society has a responsibility to create a balance between the profit motive and the ethical value of society. Otherwise, you definitely find people who have the money to patronize vices, including drugs. But we will not say because people are entertained by drugs, they get high and they get a good feel, they should be allowed to continue. We know it is destructive. So nudity, pornography, it's immoral, especially when it is celebrated, when there's a celebration of banality. It can become counterproductive to society. So we agree that, of course, as part of art, even as part of science, there will be some extent of nudity. You can't teach biology, for instance, if you do not show to some extent the human anatomy. Yes. That in itself, to some extent, is nude. But how do you, and that is the point that Kingsley was also making in his comment, to what extent are you using your creative tool, you know, to express your point? You should be able to draw a line between excessive graphic, banal presentation and what is creatively ethical. And that is key. You raised the point about our cultures. Of course, the one that comes to mind is the maiden dance among the Ogori people of Kogi State, where they say, and I think it happens in many other African societies, the initiation to womanhood, where the virgins are expected to come in their innocence, you know, almost half nude, you know, skimpy dresses, dresses enough to cover the breast, and then they have their dance, you know, but the intention is not to entertain the milk folks.
It's not erotic.
Definitely not graphic, definitely not erotic. Yeah. And we expect that artists, using the tool of technology, even in their creative productions, will be able to de-emphasize those elements of eroticism.
Back to the society.
Exactly. But what you see is that it is hyped. You know, it becomes the main thing, to the extent that even the thematic essence is lost.
Okay, it's almost celebrated. Now you've made your points, and they're well taken. We shall continue this conversation. We shall return to you, as always. And for now, we have another guest joining us via Skype from Calabar, and he is Fidelis Duka, a movie practitioner who is there, as I said, from Port Harcourt via Skype. Mr. Duka, you are welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. Good morning.
Oh, great. He's through to us now. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'd like to ask you the first question this morning. I hope you've heard other panelists here on this program discussing nudity in the creative industry. And of course, you are in the same industry. We would like to have your take on what you think about nudity in this industry.
The challenge for now is that I've listened to the various panelists there. My friend Idachaba in Abuja. The challenge for now is that I've listened to the various panelists there. My friend Idachaba in Abuja. He's a regulator, and of course, he will want to protect the interests of the regulator. And of course, we want to protect the interests of the regulator. What's important is that we must understand that, yes, what's important is there's a big challenge with how...
All right, it looks like there's some technical glitches with our Skype connection to Fidelis Duka. Our engineers will try to sort that out, and then we'll get back to him to get his views. Let's return to Fred Amata in our Lagos network studios. Mr. Fred Amata, again, to return to you, I mean, you earlier gave a historical perspective as well as what is considered, you know, the utility of nudity in the creative industry as well as the intention. What ordinarily should be or would be the boundaries of decency beyond which something then becomes offensive or otherwise, and when it's show and when it's business?
I think we don't seem to have properly defined what nudity truly is, or nakedness. We have to understand that nudity exists on several levels. Now, back in the days when we were younger and models, we were told that even your shoulders, baring your shoulders is a form of nudity. Baring your entire torso is another form of nudity. And then there's the complete full frontal nudity. Now, like, by the way, my good friend Dr. Idachaba, you seem to have missed what I said. What is the intent of the artist when he is employing nudity? You referred to a few examples, like if you are teaching biology. Nudity can simply be nakedness. Now, how is it portrayed? I like to speak for the arts itself to say that our art truly is who we are. It is either art is imitating society or society is imitating art. That is why whatever we do is of vital importance. But we cannot completely run away from nakedness in our expression. or from nudity in our expression. If we want to, for instance, show a scene of area boys fighting, they can be putting on trousers and naked up from their torso. And that is nudity. But I think what is bothering people a lot is the nudity in the female, which expression seems to say it degrades, it belittles, it does not dignify womanhood to see sexually motivating nakedness. And I think that is where the divide should be drawn. Because in a lot of instances, in your attempts to express, for instance, if somebody decides that they want to capture a brutally ugly rape scene, they will use nudity and it will not evoke this arousement in the system. Now, that is where we should be looking at. When does nudity become pornography? To put it in simple terms. And that is where the challenge truly is. My argument is not necessarily for commerce. My argument is for the arts. It is when the art is exploited in degrading values that it becomes, in terms of nudity, that it starts to become pornography. And pornography is completely condemned. If you take the examples that Hilda has talked about in our culture, you will find out that there is a hybridization of what our culture truly is. For instance, I grew up everywhere in Nigeria, and as a kid growing up, it was not unusual to see women breastfeeding in public. But today, it doesn't happen. It is considered obscene. Now, there is a growth, and the art must continue to reflect that growth. So despite the fact that we do have nudity as part of our expression as humans, as our cultural expression, it is how it is used. What is the intent of the user? Did he create this scene to arouse emotions of lust and pornography, or was this used for something more decent? It is possible, like they have said before, to use it. I'm the president of the Directors Guild of Nigeria, and I know that in the expression of art, there is a huge need to reflect society as it truly is. That is what art is. It reflects what the truth of society is, and it also uses its art to propose what the generations to come should do. So my take on this ultimately is that once it veers towards pornography, we must collectively condemn it. Whether it is for we have
matter.
It's okay.
Culture of we are upright. Our cultures across borders are upright. Despite the fact that in a lot of cultures you have fertility rites and rituals and that become like festivals that portray nudity, the intent is the key driver. So you can have a scene where there is actually nudity, but you do not feel like it doesn't invoke nudity. To use a very sensitive example, the movie Passion of the Christ, the torso of the Christ is naked. But it does not evoke any sexuality. If you understand where my argument is coming from.
Thank you, Fred Amata. Thank you, Didu. Shall return to you. But there's one point you made about breastfeeding, you know, and as you are speaking, Dr. Dashaba just reminded us here that that aspect is maternal responsibility and not to be regarded as nudity. Thank you for your submission. And let's go to Kaduna right away. Mekano Usman, your colleagues have actually been talking a little bit positively about nudity as an expression of the art. And again, considering the fact that in all our society, in this society, there are cultural differentiations that all reflect some kind of nudity, and you have also spoken much about culture, adhering to culture. And again, Hilda said that the arts is mirroring, the society and giving back to society what is in there. Now, in that consideration, what would be a reaction to the fact that our culture somehow has some level of nudity in its expression?
Kerry, and I agree with with that point. But what we need to understand is that some of us are really going above board. Like my friend Fred said, when it gets to pornography, then that's now when everybody is saying no to it. And again, talking about culture, like for instance, what I want people to understand is that when there are festivities, I think Idachaba gave an example of a festivity in Kogi State. That is, I think, for a certain group of people, and it just happened for a purpose, talking about the intent like Fred has been saying. But by the time you put something on the video, it is for everybody. It is for everybody. So I quite agree that there are scenes that have to, nudity has to be shown. Fred has given an example of a rape case. Of course, it has to be shown in a way, but then it's not going to make people to feel that, okay, there's something like love that is happening, or that something of that nature. So, but a situation whereby somebody is running a music video, just dancing and then dancing half naked. What is the intent there? What is the intent there? That's one thing I want us to be very careful about. Like Hilda said, it's some of us do this kind of things for business. But then again, we have a responsibility. We are creative people, and like I said, people look upon us. I quite agree there are instances, like for instance, if you have a doctor and you have to have an operation in a film, you can't have that particular actor being operated with his clothes on. The clothes have to be removed. But then if you are removing those clothes, to what extent are you going to remove the clothes? The problem, or one thing that is worrisome, like Mr. Fred has also agreed, is that if it is tilting towards pornography, if there is a good reason for you or for a producer or for an actor to show nudity, why not? But then some of us are going, above board. Some of us are doing it far beyond what it should be. That is why people are complaining. And mirroring the society, yes, I agree. It's what is happening in our societies. But then again, do we or don't we have a responsibility to say, okay, yes, this is what is happening, and this is what we think it should be. And if you go back to our films in the past, like for instance, we have Living in Bondage. In the north here, we have Turmindenya, we have Samira, we have Magana Jarichi. Messages were sent. Messages were sent. And I'm sure if you look at those films again, you would like to watch them over and over again. The point that has to be made is that there is a limit to how far we can go in showing nudity. if, like I keep quoting Fred, if it is for good reasons, if it is for good intention, why not? And I want to correct a point that Hilda made, that in the north, some of women are wearing, their bras are half open. Well, in the north, if you come, I don't know where she has seen those women or those pictures, but mostly you know how women dress here up north. And I think it's something that can be said to be nice. And Kerry and I quite agree with you that our culture differs. What is obtained in the north is not necessarily what is obtained in the south, which is quite understandable. And even in the north, there are differences, because there are Hausas, there are Fulanis, there are Kanuris, there are the Biroms in Jos, and so many other tribes in this part of the country. My advice to us in this creative industry is that we shouldn't go beyond where, above board. We shouldn't go far in, exposing women in our films. We should do it in such a way that it's within our culture, it's within our context, and of course, promoting the arts. I agree with Fred totally. Film is arts, and it's a reflection of the society. But what are you really reflecting? What do you want to achieve? Hilda says she has kids in her heart. So by the time myself and Hilda and Fred give way to other young people to come up on board, so what are we leaving behind for the future generation? I think this is a question that all of us in the industry need to ask ourselves, and we need to really address properly.
Right. Meikano Usman from Cardinal Network Studios, I'd like to thank you, as well as the other guests. Just to indicate that we are continuing with this conversation. Comments have also come in by way of tweets. You can see the Twitter handle there on the left side of your screen. That's the bottom side. That's at NTA GMN. That will be after this short break.
Oh boy, climb this thing now. No be only to connect lights. Come you and yourself now. Now wow. Oh boy, come down now. Oga Kasali electrician, who will they look for with this? Oh, Oga Kasali, come help us fix this wire now.
Sorry, I no longer carry out illegal connection. It puts the lives of people at risk and can cause fire outbreak and disrupt power supply. I will never be part of anything that has to do with this any longer, because change begins with me.
Oh boy, letting him talk makes sense. Oh boy, we could carry this ladder from
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Admission forms for the 2017-2018 academic session of NTA Television College Jos into its diploma programs are now on sale. The diploma programs are in film and TV production, broadcast journalism, and TV engineering technology. Applicants are required to have at least 5 credits, including English language and mathematics at SSC, NECO, or GCO levels in not more than 1 sitting. Application forms can be obtained from the TV College Refi Jos or at any NTA zonal centers nationwide on payment of a no-refundable fee of 7,500 Naira in bank draft in favor of NTA Television College. Completed application forms should be returned to the Office of the Academic Secretary, NTA Television College, or the Center of Purchase on or before 28th of July 2017. For further inquiries, please call 0806 980 9807 or 0703 660 7155. NTA Television College, training you to be the best you can be.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network. From what you can see on the caption on the screen, we are today discussing nudity in the creative industry. It's not just nudity, it's the one that, of course, has offensive, as some persons have indicated, offensive intent, as well as erotic implications. We have reactions already from some of our viewers, and we are taking those tweets right away. Suleiman Idris tweets, decency is one of the the most important ingredients that every society needs for it to be successful. Sexual perversion adds no value.
All right, I had Buka Daya. He said, please, Dr. Dachaba should save our kids from nude music shows being broadcast in Nigeria.
And then we have this from Ibeneme Dominic. Ibeneme Dominic is tweeting, the Western world has succeeded in corrupting our societal values. On the screen, everywhere, nudity is patronized.
All right, Suleiman says, nudity, nobody is discussing restricting or blocking pornography sold on the streets in clear view of children and adults alike.
Law Alpha C tweets, nudity is devilish and has considerable contours of insanity ingrained in its expression in a morally decimated audience.
Now, Festus Kimboewa said, sad that women directors and producers also direct and produce videos and movies with nudity and obscenity. It's time to say enough is enough.
And Douglas Orafa tweets, the spate of nudity in the creative industry is actually lack of creativity. Many PG-rated movies are much more interesting. PG stands for parental guidance.
Okay, I've read that of Booker. Now go to Law Alpha. Nudity is a borrowed culture from the West, but highly flawed and misapplied in our clime. So the incidence of rape is prevalent.
Dele Jack Solomon. Now, where is NBC, which cross-viewed or cross-checked anything before it goes on air? Our religious institutions, teachers and parents have a lot of work to do.
All right, PST Johnson Solomon, nudity in the Nigerian movie industry is in public or secret should be discouraged. After all, what moral lessons do we learn from it?
And we have this one from Job. Job tweets, now this is a good topic. Nudity in our creative industry is not a true representation of our core moral values.
All right, Festus, I hope you haven't read this one. Festus Akimboewa, there's nothing creative in the culture of nudity and obscenity in Nigeria's creative industry. That's demeaning women and destroying our morals.
Mike Ayakwa tweets, it's very unfortunate that nudity is now the order of the day in our creative industry. I wonder what they intend to achieve. Shame, he writes.
Douglas D. Orafa, the creative industry has added two moral decadence that mirroring society, Hollywood promotion of patriotism is what we have to learn.
Now, Dele Jack Solomon again has another tweet. Nigerian artists are always trying to be like American musicians. The majority of the artists are not versed and knowledgeable enough about music.
All right, and I think that's what we have for now from Nigerians who are reacting to our conversation this morning, which of course touches, all families and of course all facets of human endeavor. And now we would like to go back to Calabar, Kingsley. Fidelis Duka.
Yeah. Fidelis, I'm sorry. We hope that the Skype connection is much better now. The last time we couldn't hear you clearly. What we're discussing, of course, I'm sure you've also been monitoring the comments of the other panelists. It's not nudity as nudity, but the application of excessive nudity or excessive scenes in movies. Incidentally, a good number of the guests, if not virtually all of you, with the exception of Idachaba, you are all in the motion picture. Nudity we are talking about in the creative industry also covers musical videos. And you see all kinds of things. Some of the beats have no connection whatsoever with the kinds of dances you see, what they call show what your mama gave you and all of that. What's your take on this?
Listening to all the comments so far, I think it's important we understand that pornography is a far distant position from the issue of nudity. There could be some level of creative nudity where, like Mekano mentioned, you are conducting an operation and of
all right. Well, again, I'm sorry that that's hung there in the Skype connection. I think, gentlemen, of course, together with Hilda, who is in our Port Harcourt Network Studios. We're not talking about nudity. Sorry, the topic really is not nudity for the sake of nudity. I mean, before each of us came to the studios this morning, we had our bath, and I didn't have. I mean, you had your bath. I didn't have my clothes on. Carry on. The same thing with you. Obviously, what we are talking about is the application of nudity that verges on the obscene, the erotic, and so on and so forth. So let's come back to Idachaba in the studios here. One of the issue I wanted Fidelis to respond to has to do with nudity, not just in motion picture, but also in musical videos. To say, I mean, you have a 2 or 3 minute video clip, and all that you find are, you know, suggestive scenes of dances and, you know, women who are half clad. In those days when we had a newspaper that was called Lagos Weekend, they used to refer to something as Good Evening Street Dress. You know.
Thank you, Kingsley. Again, let me re-establish the fact that there is a co-relationship between nudity and even pornography, as they seem to be talking about, and that is the link is to the extent of the suggestiveness. There is a way you graphically present nudity that it becomes, in the mind of the viewer, a stimulant for pornography. Don't forget that what you do with the viewer is to engage the mentality of the viewer. And by the time you go into indecency and you graphically engage in erotic dances or sexually suggestive maneuvers of your human anatomy, you are as good as delivering pornography. And that is where the critical question about intent comes in. Of course, you can use your camera using a long shot to show a rape film. But in delivering a rape scene, you go to the extent of showing how it is done, the clothes are pulled off, and how the victim and the predator engage in a sexual activity, then you are indirectly doing a pornographic scene. And that is the point. Even in the musicals that you see these days, which Kingsley has mentioned about, which is also a very disturbing trend, you find that rather than concentrate on the lyrics, where the thematic, the didactic essence is, the creative effort is rather concentrated on showing the bumps and wiggling the bumps, or showing the cleavages in very high close-ups. And what would you say is the intent? Obviously, is to create some erotic feeling. And we are saying this is counterproductive to society. But let me use the opportunity to correct an impression from someone who tweeted about NBC censoring or monitoring programs before they go on air. The NBC, as a regulatory body, does not engage in video classification or censorship. What NBC does is to regulate broadcast content. And we give the broadcast stations the editorial liberty to put on air, to schedule programs that they feel are timely and important to their viewers. But we also expect that whatever they put on air is in strict adherence with what we call the broadcasting code. And in the Nigerian broadcasting code, it's very explicit. You cannot, as a broadcast station in Nigeria, air pornography. And even if you are to engage in minor scenes or non-graphic scenes of nudity, as everybody has argued, it must be limited, you know, to what you call the watershed period, between 10 and 5 a.m., 10 p.m. in the night and 5 a.m., and even then, on a premium channel or on a pay-per-view channel. So basically, broadcasting law in Nigeria does not encourage pornography and does not even encourage the reckless misuse of nudity. And the purpose, obviously, is to ensure that there's a degree of moral consciousness, of moral sanctity.
All right, Dr. Idachaba, thank you very much. You said that NBC has the responsibility of monitoring the content of what is broadcast on our airwaves. And meanwhile, those video clips are content, you know, as case maybe. Maybe we'll return to, to that, because they're also content. And let's go to Port Harcourt now, where Hilda is standing by. Hilda, you have listened, you know, over a couple of minutes now to other panelists here and what I've said. Now, you also have spoken extensively about creative nudity, but going to the extent of being suggestive, it happens to be, you know, the key issue here. And as Kingsley raised a short while ago, we'll talk about musical videos, not just about acting, but again, musical videos is also acting at its own level, where it's so explicit that there is clear conviction that there is intention in the way the dancers are dressed, in the way they break to the music, in the way they dance to the tune. In fact, the dance steps shows that, look, this is a clear plan to show. And again, not only that, because even the lyrics of some of these songs tell you more about sex, tell you more about, you know, as Kingsley said, show us what your mommy gave to you. Is that not suggestive, or what your mama gave to you? Is that not suggestive? I want to hear from you here. There.
Suggestive, it is suggestive. And let me correct something. I'm not promoting or supporting nudity or obscenity or pornography. Anyone who knows me knows that I keep shouting about it, especially when it exploits the art. Exploitation is an offense. It's a criminal offense, if you ask me. And if you have to exploit my art to get rich, then you annoy me. Having said that, it's important that we raise people properly. We raise children properly with the right morals and the right values. Unfortunately, the spaces where this can be done is infiltrated with a lot. And so it takes more than just wishful thinking. It takes also attitude and action to get that right. Now, with the musical videos, if you have noticed, most of those songs are hip-hop. And the hip-hop tradition allows for some of the things that you see, because it's more of a street kind of art drawn from the streets. And so what they're doing is engaging the street with the life of the street. Having said that, I am totally against anyone just exposing women because you think you can. Because there are actually some scenes in musical videos where you find the man who is a musician who is actually saying, shake that booty for me. He's so well dressed, sometimes even in tie, and he gets a lady to just wear pants, and then she starts bouncing her booty like he has ordered her to bounce your booty, shake your booty, she'll push that thing up, shake. And you know, NVC, not NVC, the regulatory body for all of these materials, they're there. They regulate, they approve. These things are shown. They don't stop it. They don't block it. But if I put it in my film, they block. But they don't block the musical video. So meaning that the musical video is allowed to do some of these things. So maybe because those ones are 3 minutes, maybe, I don't know. But let's actually even look at the lyrics. Are we allowed? Because those lyrics are suggestive of nudity, of obscenity, of vulgarity, of pornography. If somebody says, shake that booty for me, bounce that booty, sit on me, do this, it's all sex. It's all sex. We need to sometimes tell ourselves the truth. How did we get here? When we started, was it this way? No, it wasn't. At what point did it go away? At the point where everyone started saying, oh, can't you do what the Americans do? Can't you do what the Americans do? Now people are doing what the Americans are doing. And somebody is saying, can't we do what Nigerians are doing? Can't we be Nigerians? Yes, we can be Nigerians, but let's draw this line clear on all of us, you know. So the world is looking at us, we're looking at the world. Let's draw it clear. We cannot completely eliminate creative nudity. Like you said, you had a bath this morning and you had a bath with your clothes off. we cannot completely eliminate nudity in creativity, but we cannot also merge pornography and nudity and call it the same thing, because it is not. I do not support pornography put out on air, especially at prime time. I do not support of it being hawked along our streets, and I do not support anyone just exposing a woman because you want to exploit the art.
Hilda, thank you very much. You've raised the point about, raising children and the implications of nudity, creative nudity, or misuse of nudity in a creative industry. That's a thought that has occurred to me, and I would like you to respond to this. Nudity in the creative industry. A number of the artists who are used for this purpose, usually they're either extras in movies, or they are club dancers who are brought to dance, in some of these erotic musical videos. Presumably, a number of them probably do not have children. I've often asked myself, when they then have their children and they grow old, and the children also become adolescents and they have access to the videos that their moms, when they were young, were shooting, how would a woman like that respond to her child who asks her a provocative question, say, "Mama, why were you doing this?"
A video vixen and being a dancer, don't forget it's somebody's profession. Maybe at the time that she did it, it was the only thing that was available to her at the time. So I want to believe that when it gets to that point, she might be able to raise an answer. I haven't been a video vixen before, haven't played any role being nude before. I'm not even allowed to hardly dress provocatively or suggestively. Hardly do I do that. So I may not have the correct answer, but certain things that people do, they do because of their personal reasons. Maybe it's all that is left available to her, or as a professional dancer, she's been trained to do that kind of dancing. I really can't say for anyone, but it's sad. She might have a lot of difficulty swallowing her whole world to explain what happened with her life at the time that it happened. People go through situations. I don't know.
Thank you indeed, Hilda. You have contributed immensely to this conversation this morning. Because time is not our friend, I would have just told you a little story, about my links with the musical shows, in the early 90s, where I got in touch with a lady dancer, who had got a young boy, a young child, but when she rehearses in her room, it was her child that plays the music for her and even helps to direct her dancing. In fact, bringing the boy into the system of her dance pattern. But that's a discussion for another day. At this point, I'd like to thank you very much for being part of our show this morning as the only lady, among the men who are panelists here this morning. Thank you for reaching us from Port Harcourt, Hilda Dokubo, who is a very known actress in Nigeria.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, now back to the studio here in Abuja, and we have reactions again, more reactions. In fact, many more Nigerians are reacting to these. That's and right. You have the first as well.
That's right. We have this from Change to Progress. That's the Twitter handle of the contributor. Reality is that we can't eat our cake and have it. It's either we have a regulated or an unregulated society with their consequences. It's just simple.
All right, and NSC or Nimisi says, if in the olden days we go naked, does it mean that now that we are educated, we should still continue to do that?
Dele Jack Solomon tweets, the dangers are manifesting already in the acts of smoking, sexual assault of the opposite sex, drug trafficking, dropout, kidnapping, and robbery.
Okay, Kabir Ibrahim, he says, what Mr. Fred is saying is off the point regarding fighters and breastfeeding mothers. All these examples, people don't see them as nude.
And we have this from Ruben Ayok Buba. There should be a piece of legislation to check this decadence before it destroys the decency of our culture and moral fiber for our society.
All right, Jide Mutu, we always ask to define nudity whenever we are talking. How its negative impact to our cultural values.
We have this from MC EJ Live. I expected Madam Hilda to respond concretely on the issue of the consideration of our kids, but she gave a less definitive answer. Kids now grow to adopt. Well, he has an ellipsis there.
Yeah. Now, NSC, let me see once again, says, please, I disagree with Fred's definition of nudity, saying exposure of the upper part of our body is nudity. Nudity is nudity.
Then this one is from Alhaji to Clint, I believe. An artistic work is a reflection of the society. Only a trained artist can professionally manage nudity in the arts. Please listen to Hilda Dokubo.
Now, Bukar Danyawa says, Fred Amata, you can't justify this mess, please. Let's do the proper thing. We reject nudity in whatever form.
Festus Akimboyewa twist. We should celebrate those who succeed without nudity and obscenity in Nigeria's creative industry and stop celebrating naked and obscene artists. All right, so those are the tweets that second set of tweets that we are having from this. Well, again, for the last time, we want to try to take this lottery to go back to Calabar to see whether we win with Fidelis. Fidelis, Duka, unfortunately, we haven't had the opportunity of speaking with you. You just said a moment ago that the screen, there was a blip on the screen, which means that we have lost him. Let's go back now to Fred Amata in Lagos to get his closing thoughts on this. Fred Amata, would like to appreciate you, but what are your closing thoughts? You talk about the role of nudity in the creative industry, the creative use of it, but again, drifting down to the musical videos, we see how suggestive, how obscene, how decadent, even provocative some of these things are. And what could be done? What is the role of a producer or a director?
Let's remind Fred also that some people tweeted here and they were just against some of your submissions.
Okay, first of all, to start with an old proverb, you cannot put your head in the sand and say what you cannot see just isn't there. Nudity, the expression of nudity in home videos, for instance, it relates to the history, in music videos, relates to the history of how the particular kind of music itself evolved. A lot of this music is like protest music, and like Hilda Cooper said, street music. And so the expression is there. It is worldwide. We live in a World Wide Web world, and it is foolhardy to pretend that if it's not on our screens, as is controlled by the NBC, it is not there. It is indeed there, and it influences, because that is how culture grows. Culture is a hybrid of events. You continue to hybridize. And at this point in our expression, in our evolution, we are a situation where we have borrowed from all over the world and created something that now resonates with the rest of the world. It is like globalization, you know, from your local to the globe. For those who didn't really understand what I meant about nakedness, I was trying to explain. For instance, in modeling, there are particular definitions of what nudity is. Something like my shoulders. Exposing your shoulder is a level of nudity. That is what I meant. Exposing your torso is a level of nudity. And then there's the full frontal exposition, which is also nudity. But that is in the strict sense. In the suggestive sense, you can use even a shot of a hand, plain hand that is not sexual, to express sexuality. So the intent, the use of the art is key. For me, I think despite the fact that we are hybridizing, we must put our best foot forward, and our best foot is our glorious history.
All right. Thank you, Fred Amata. You've been wonderful this morning talking to us from Lagos end. Fred Amata, actor, movie director, thank you for being part of Good Morning Nigeria today. All right, and let's return to Kano, where Alhaji Abdullahi Mekano Usman is. Alhaji Usman, what's your final thoughts this morning, or briefly, just briefly?
Carry on. It's wonderful. Carry on. This discussion is wonderful. They have brought up so many interesting issues and points. What I am talking about is the excessive showcasing of nudity is what we don't really need, because if you look at the films that were produced in the past, they have good stories, they have wonderfully and creatively done, and people still want to watch those films. And even from the tweets that we've received during the course of this program, it's clear that people really want to patronize us. People want to watch our films, but then some of us go to the excess of creating scenes that suggest sex and things like that. In conclusion, I want us to think of something. We need to showcase the need for us to showcase who we are, what we stand for, our culture, our country, and most importantly, those of us in the creative industry, we need to keep asking ourselves, what are we leaving behind for the future generation?
All right, that was Alhaji Abdullahi Mekano Usman. He's President, Motion Picture Practitioners Association of Nigeria, and he's also a scriptwriter and movie producer. We appreciate your insights in our conversation this morning.
And it's good having me in the studio. Thank you.
Now that we're back now to our Abuja studios, let's get very briefly also the closing thoughts of Dr. Armstrong Idachaba. He's a director, of course, at the National Broadcasting Commission. It's how do we preserve our civilization from the toxic influence of pop culture?
Thank you very much, Kingsley and Kirian, for a good program. I think that, largely speaking, we've built a consensus on this program. Both those who stand for artistic expression, art for art's sake, those who talk about commercialization of the arts, and the regulator. I think we have come to an agreement that the issue of nudity, pornography is a disturbing trend. And to that extent, I think we have to build a national action plan that will call for close collaboration between the producers, between the business people, within the regulators, and with the support of the general public, so that when this trend is curbed through regulation, viewers will understand that it's a national imperative, and that there will be no issue about over-regulation or stifling of the arts.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right, Armstrong, the time is not on our side. Thank you very much indeed. There's been Dr. Armstrong Idachaba, Director in the Director General's Office, Nigerian Broadcasting Commission. Thank you for being part of our show.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Now, Nigeria splits in latest FIFA rankings. Get more of these as we take you on sports. Victor Azu is our guide.
Hello and welcome to Sports.